Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the last few years, we have heard and read a great deal about inclusion and diversity. And the fastest way to clear a room, as my guest has told me, is come up and say, I do inclusion and diversity. Well, today we're going to look at something a little different way to approach this. And it's play. That's right, play, Play, the stuff we did as children. Remember? Well, is play a way to improve communication, employee engagement, and foster inclusion? What does play mean? Is it bringing in, like in the tech world that I came from, does it mean bringing in foosball and ping pong tables and pool tables into the workplace? Now, I worked with a number of high-tech companies, and that's what they did. And they thought that was the way to do it. Yet, those very companies are having more and more people still leaving. So obviously, that didn't work. We tried mandatory compliance training. Has that actually worked? What I heard in my corporate life more often, whenever these would come up, was, oh God, we have to go to another one of these classes. There's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way. Now, is there a science and an art of play? My guest today, Brandi Heather, says yes, there is. How does it work? Well, stay tuned. We're about to find out. As I said, Brandi Heather is my guest today. She is a best-selling author. She is a world-class educator, as well as a diversity and inclusion professional. Now, this is really impressive. She is a four-time nominee for the Alberta Women's Entrepreneurship Award and Women of Excellence in Central Alberta, Canada. So, Brandi, welcome to Secrets for Walking on Water.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here today with you, Frank. It's going to be a great conversation.
I'm looking forward to it, obviously. Now, Brandi, give the viewers a little bit about your background. What were you like as a kid? What sort of led you to this play model?
Well, it's funny because I grew up in a house where I lived. My father was an artist. So in our home, there were kind of like boundless opportunities to be creative all the time. And not just with, paint and those kinds of things, but everything was an artist's playground in my house. So the leftover sawdust from doing projects would be, the place I would play a lot and snow forts and all of those things. So I kind of grew up in this space where creativity and play were, not just welcomed, it was just part of how we were and what we did. And what I really realized was I don't know for a long time, I didn't know for a long time that creativity would actually lead to something that was a gift. Like it was a gift in teaching and it was a gift in communication. And often, I was called, an artsy kid, and you saw things, oh, she's just an artsy kid. And that artsiness actually was a gift, right? And so as a kid, I had this enormous imagination. I could build and do just about anything with anything. And so I think that's where it started, was that I just didn't have that, structured play situation. And actually most of us didn't, right? We stayed out until the streetlights came on, and we navigated, negotiated all of these things without anyone saying, at 6 p.m. to 7:15, this is where you'll be. So part of that is what created me and how I am in my interest in this space.
And then that moved you into teaching.
It did. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I think I always had this sense that I was supposed to, or I could inspire someone. I don't think I always knew who it would be, because I got my education degree and worked with kids. And what's so funny is this changed over time for me. I got my education degree, and then I decided, I don't think I want to work with kids. And so then I got my master's, which is really funny because it's come full circle. I work with children and children's programming all the time now. But at the time I thought, I think I like adults more. I think I was here to inspire adults. So I got my master's degree and then went into teaching as a college professor for a long time. And So yeah, I think I always felt like teaching was my stage. Like there was a place I could really thrive.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I knew exactly what that looked like. Certainly when I started, I had no idea what that looked like. So
So, as a teacher, what led you to start focusing on this inclusion and diversity? I mean, we didn't use those words back then. So,
no, we didn't at all. And I guess part of the childhood and growing up piece as well. My father had MS from the time I was 12, and a really progressive MS. So in my world, there wasn't such a thing as disability inclusion. There was only adaptation. So we learned to adapt everything. And most of the time, it was totally in play. Like we couldn't get into a door, so we took a chunk of plywood and made accessible ramps, and couldn't get into a pool, and so we figured out things with a pool noodle and slides, and we figured all that stuff out. So to me, it wasn't adapted physical education or disability inclusion. It was just how we navigated.
mhm.
And so for me, it had less of it certainly didn't have a title in my mind. But what I did know was that the creativity, that play and creativity space, that's where you had to be to create great adaptation. And so it started with those kind of physical adaptations, right? Chunk of plywood, pool noodle, change the space. And then I realized that actually that model of adaptation, the things that you could just adapt on the fly and know, crossed over into social inclusion and cognitive inclusion. And now all of a sudden that art became, really functional. And when you looked at disability inclusion and then diversity and inclusion, I found there's a direct connection between when we're really creative and when we can find innovative solutions. So when I started teaching, what I knew was I needed to be in a space that probably wasn't an art classroom, that really dealt with finding people's creative gifts and, the courage to create and all of those things. Because on the other side of that, there was a whole bunch of space that needed someone to come in and really help make accessibility and inclusion a thing that wasn't just an add-on checkbox
Hmm.
in their program. So yeah.
That's very interesting. My youngest brother was in a car accident when he was 23 and he's quadriplegic now for 38 years. And you're right on point. You just adapt. We made do. You just do what you have to do to get it done.
Yeah.
And that is something where your students probably didn't even realize what you were teaching them.
Well, and it's so true because, I taught everything from the history of sport to ethics in sport, and then created an adapted physical education diploma where students would come in, and I'd created the entire curriculum, and they would come in and finish in 2 years and go on to be physiotherapists and educators and that. But the one foundational course that they had to take was this one course I taught in disability inclusion. And they would say, oh my goodness, I had to take that course. Like it was on my list. It was mandatory. And so many people would leave and say, oh my goodness, like I had no idea. And now this is what I actually want to do and focus on for my whole life. So I came in kind of kicking and screaming, and I left with this kind of joy and a different way of looking at the world. And so for me, there was something in that like there was something really special in that. And then someone said to me one day, well, you make learning fun. Like when we're learning things, and they're very serious things, we
Hmm.
actually enjoy ourselves. So for me, those two things, kind of that college professor side, I taught so many things, and I did it from a place of play, which I never would have labeled it as that. But people really enjoyed it. And so that was the connection as being a college professor. Was I knew how to help people learn things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've observed as the parent, now a grandparent, is children learn more when they're having fun.
And that's a science. Like it's not a guess. It's not I wonder if, like, that is solid science. Learning and play are hugely connected, and actually they're connected for our whole life, but we forget that. We've kind of put that in our back pockets, and
Yeah, it kind
we
of
don't
goes
talk about
away
it.
as we get older.
Yeah.
Now, Brandi, we've seen in the United States, we've had legislation and mandated training to address inclusion and diversity and discrimination and all kinds of things since the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't been particularly successful.
It
Now,
hasn't.
you left this very successful career as an educator, and you were doing really, really well. And you started a consulting company. What did you see that was missing?
For me, I had heard so much about people hating training and, kicking and screaming going into these trainings, and then coming out and feeling lots of things, but often not something that was sustainable or lasting. They got lots of checklists, and they got lots of do's and don'ts, and they, what people left with was really empty, and even to the point where they left not feeling included and actually feeling greater exclusion at work and separation. So a lot of that process, even though well intended, was that people came in with a mindset for learning the do's and don'ts and the rights and wrongs, and for me, that's not the process. And that's part of what's failed the process, is that we really strictly put a line in the sand, and instead of having conversations and knowing what people know and where they're coming from, we've said this is how it's going to be. And for me, I knew the difference in college education. I knew what happened when we made students take courses, and I knew why that happened. It was important, but I also knew how to come out on the other side and really make it so it was a lasting thing. It wasn't a course they took for 45 hours. And it, like, for many, many times, I hear from students all over the world who are still using the stuff we were learning 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So for me, the jump from college professor and a life of solid pension and all
that's right.
fun stuff, all of those great, amazing, stable things. For me, it was that I knew that people could actually enjoy this education and really change. Like, not, we made a great flyer with 3 great pictures on the front, and our logo and our mission are, unbelievably inclusive. We could actually help people feel belonging. And for me, that it was a challenge, but I also felt like I understood the process, and that it could be different. So that was my big thing. I thought there's got to be a bigger playground out here where this is such important stuff, and we can do it in a way that people feel empowered and strong and
remember, and they retain it.
And remember.
That's amazing.
And retain it. Yeah.
Now, when we spoke, we talked about we're in a really very much a divided world, and there's so much apprehension about talking with each other, and there's fear of being judged, of being attacked verbally, of being shunned, etc. Now, you walk into this environment. This is the world you walk into, right? How do you address that?
Well, I'm going to give you an example, and it's going to seem like an odd example, but we have stopped speaking to each other. And I'll give you my actual example, which is that in a space where I come into and people want to talk about disability, they will come up to me and want to talk about a person living with a disability, but they don't believe they have the right words. So sometimes they'll stop mid-sentence, and they'll actually stop talking and just ignore the question that they had. And in that moment, what happens is a total separation, right? No learning occurs, nothing happens. So I often lead with, I can see that you have a question. I can see that you want to ask something. Ask it in the way you would ask it. No judgment, no nothing. Just ask it the way you would ask it. And if we need to learn different ways to say it or do it, or that, let's do that together. But now I have the question. Like, now we've had a conversation, and not just fear stands on this side, so scared and out of mostly the best intentions of not hurting anyone or saying something wrong. But we stop those conversations, and the more we stop that, the more it will continue. Because for me, it's a cycle. So we're scared, and then we hide, and then we feel shame because we didn't know, and then we go back to fear. So for me, the process in here has to be that people keep having conversations, even if they're tripping over their feet. Like we never learn anything without falling down. Nothing. We, in our whole lives, we didn't learn anything without falling down. And yet we expect this perfection of people, of knowing and understanding, but we can't get there until we can learn some things. And what we know is if you walk into learning scared, learning is going to struggle to happen. So for me, I walk into those spaces all the time, and I come from a place that says, I 0% know everything. Can we have a conversation? Because, right, it's learning, right? No one has all the answers.
Exactly.
0 people.
Exactly. And you told me a story that you went into a corporate environment, and you had a paper plate, I believe it was, and a piece of clay. How did that go?
Well, so this is part of my process. I think anyone can take a diversity and inclusion training. But because I can look up 10,000 of those online right now and take a webinar, and at the end I'll get a certificate. But for me, the learning is an experience. So yeah, the example I gave you is walking into a corporate setting, and before everyone gets there, putting out a paper plate with a ball of clay on it. And it's just a gray, it's not Play-Doh. It's clay. It's just a chunk of clay. And so I watch people come into the setting, and they've all been told they're going to be taking diversity and inclusion training. And I just wait and I watch. And so people shuffle around. Everyone has a plate. So it's not like there's some without. And what happens in that time before anything is said is that people look beside each other. They start to imagine what we're going to do. They start to think about, they have a lot of stereotypes about what having a piece of art, and play might be in front of them. Some move away, they will see their body, posture shift. And they've already come in with all these ideas about what the diversity and inclusion training is going to be. So now I've given them something else to worry about.
Right.
Right? Because they become very concerned about what's going to happen next.
Right.
And unless you're really good with clay and sculpture, or you feel really confident in that, which is a very small number of people, then you're in that room. Now we have a common ground, right? Now we have a place where we can go. And I've actually switched their mindset from worrying about what I'm going to say or what it's going to look like to this ball of clay. And some people will stop speaking to each other, or in really great work cultures, they'll actually start to communicate what the clay, in their childhoods or when they did that, or they'll start to tell stories. But in a lot of cultures that I go into, everyone sits back, and then I wait and wait and wait. And then I might say something like, how many people in this room are artists? And in that moment, now we've even switched it again. Now we put a title and a label, and now we've created a situation for most people who wouldn't answer yes. And in that moment, what we can come back to is all the things that happen in 5 minutes without even speaking a word, is all the things that happen every day in our lives when we think about, inclusion or new conversations, or the diversity and the incredible opportunity and diversity. Every time we do that, there's all this silent, unwritten stuff that's happening. And then we can actually have a conversation from that silence. And when people start to share what they were thinking, or don't, they move away from those conversations. However that happens, now we have something to talk about, and we have a common ground. And what I did was shift their worry about diversity and inclusion to something else, so that we can now come into it from a place where we didn't dive in with fear and stereotype and shame leading the game, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, yeah. So a lot of what I do is shift perspective so we can actually see what people need.
That's a great point, because I talk to so many organizations, and particularly over the last 2 years, and they'll tell me, Frank, we are constantly reaching out to our employees. We do surveys, we do questionnaires, we do it all the time. We're asking them, what do you want? And then we try to put a program in place, and our participation is terrible. It's terrible. And you said to me,
Yeah.
you're asking the wrong question. What should they be asking?
Well, what's interesting to me is that we've been asking this question and creating these facts for a long time. What does inclusion mean to someone else? What does inclusion mean to someone else? And how does that look for groups of people? Which, for me, inclusion is so personal that we actually have to understand what it means to the individual. And so I think we're asking the wrong question. I think we need to start back, because we keep moving forward and forward and forward. I think we actually need to step backwards to go forwards and be able to say, what makes you feel included? Like, what is it that when you walk in this space every day, when you come to work, what makes you feel included here? Because now we have a positive thing to go from, because we're often asking about, we want people to learn about other people before we've actually taken a look at us.
Right.
And so for me, the system's backwards. We're trying to change systems and then help people. And instead, I would say what we need to do is actually ask people about what inclusion looks like and feels like to them. And then, so kind of what I call brave me. So let's look at me, and then let's look at us. So brave us. What does it look like when I can see what your skills and talents are and the things that make you feel included now? And now we have a conversation. And once we've had those smaller conversations and we can see that in ourselves and others, now we can take a step to brave systems and brave organizations. And so I think sometimes, even though we're asking lots of survey questions, we've forgotten to have conversations, because what makes people feel included and like they belong is fundamental to understanding how we make great systems work and how we make places where people actually want to come to work. Like, the world is struggling to find places where people love what they're doing and love to be at work. And for me, that strategy, it has to start with from the inside out.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. I was a corporate executive, and you look at these questionnaires and surveys, and the questionnaire is slanted anyway. And people are afraid, almost afraid, not to agree.
Oh,
and staff, they're smart. I heard one person tell me, he said, okay, speak. I was in the military for a while. I said, okay, speak freely. He said, Frank, this is same circus, just different clowns. We've been down this path so many times, and nothing really does happen. It's crazy. But Brandi, now in this COVID world that we're living in,
mm-hmm.
and we've had 2 very, very difficult years. And I talked to a lot of executives, and they said, Frank, this touchy-feely stuff, it was fine 2-3 years ago when we were trying to do it. But man, we've had 2 horrible years. We can't sit around holding hands singing Kumbaya anymore. We got to get things done. What do you say to
that? Oh my goodness. I get that so much in my work. And for a long time, I actually never even mentioned play, because we have so many stereotypical ideas about what that looks like. And your Kumbaya example is perfect, because people would say to me, we need to get things done. And so we don't have time to have, 15 minutes of playtime and bring out rubber chickens and balloons. And I always say, your preconceived idea of what play looks like we're needing to disconnect your idea of what that is. Because if your idea about play is that we take 15 minutes every day and we do something totally separate from what we're doing, and that every person gets to play in their way, or we're all going to play collectively, you've got the whole process wrong. Actually, what we need to do is, because we want productivity and innovation, and we want, people to feel belonging and engaged, and all those things that are wonderfully written and science proven. we want that. And if we go backwards and we say, what is it about your day that made you come here today? Like, what was it this morning that, even though you knew the day was going to be hard, that still made you come to work? What is it that in your day that you get a moment where you feel really confident and courageous and capable? And in that moment, you're bringing your whole self to work. What does that moment look like? Because it isn't, but now it could be for other people, but it's personal. It isn't rubber chickens and throwing things around. It's actually finding out people's play personality and really understanding that when we're doing our best work, we're in play. It's timeless. We have a sense that, we have a sense of confidence. We have a sense of, I didn't watch the clock. It came from me. Nobody made me do it. If we look at education, if you just take education for an example, most teachers would tell me the reason they come to school every day, get up, and even when it was terrible, it was about kids. And I would ask them to do this. I want you to capture the next time in your classroom that you had that sense of, oh my goodness, that's amazing. I want you to take a picture of it, because on those days when you think, I have no idea why I'm here, we haven't taken advantage of all the moments that we do have that we are in play at our work. We need to notice those. We don't need to create them. We need to notice them. And so really, for me, it's not about adding a foosball table or a ping pong table. I often giggle that ping pong tables just become things that we set a lot of things on that becomes not functional.
Correct.
But if we asked the people we work with, and they said to us, actually, ping pong makes me feel A, B, and C, and D. I feel super playful when I do that. Now you have purpose behind the ping pong table. But until we know how people play, we can't move into that productivity and all of those things. It's a science. There's a science to the connection between play and work.
That's very interesting, because it could be a moment in time. It doesn't have to be a particular activity, correct?
No. And very often it isn't. Now, in my training, we do lots and lots and lots of different challenging activities to bring out play personalities and to understand how people really connect and when they are the most productive and what makes them feel engaged and like their best self. But at the end of that, there isn't a set protocol that says, we're going to do this for an hour every day. We start to check in moments, not in days. So the example I like to give is that Simon Sinek talks about love, right? And he talks about that love, you can't prove you're in love.
Correct.
Well, inclusion's the same way, right? Inclusion is mindful acts that we do every day that make people feel like they're connected and belong and important and valued. And so it's not in a single moment where we have a, cupcake social. It's in the moments in between all of those things that's the part that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the moments between the big celebrations and all those things.
Wow, that's outstanding. I've heard that Simon Sinek talk, and you just, it's you know it. You know you're in love. You know you feel included. Yeah. You know you feel valued. Conversely, you know when you're not.
100%.
And that's what's
people can define both.
Leaving. That's why these people are leaving. Now, Brandi, in your book, which is behind you there, Return
it is.
to Play, Rebuilding Resilience, Risk, and Connection. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't bought this book, go get it. Go get it today. This is something you need to read. And in there, Brandi, you list 7 ways that play can make a difference. And you've touched on several of them already. Which one would you really want to share right now? Which do you think is the one that people need to grasp?
For me, the one that people really need to grasp is this biological drive. Play is as important in our lives as connection and shelter and all of those things. And it's actually, we're biologically driven to that. And in that moment, when our brains are, our brain chemistry and everything aligns and we feel like we're in play, that is actually the place where we have the greatest opportunity for learning, but for also seeing the diverse perspectives of people. So in that moment, when we feel that, now we're open to hearing different perspectives. And for me, the biological science of play combined with the culture at work, the culture in education and health, when those two things can meet and people can see the real science behind it, we have incredible opportunities, not just in retention and creating diverse and inclusive spaces. The science of play actually is going to drive the strategy of how we work in our spaces. So it's not just it's not a soft science. There's hard science, and I'm happy to send anyone my list of the hard science that's behind it. So
exactly. I'm a mentor with the University of California Entrepreneurship Academy and the 10 research universities in California. And when they start this program with these aspiring entrepreneurs, they show them a video, and they give them first they give them spaghetti and marshmallows. I'm sure you've seen this, right?
Yeah.
And they tell them, see who can make the biggest thing. So the engineers start drawing stuff, and then they show them kindergartners. And the kindergartners, nobody's drawing, they're just trying and doing it. And the kindergartners always win.
Always. They don't put fear in front of every move they make. They don't look around them to see if anyone else is doing it. They aren't riddled with judgment or fear that someone doesn't see them, and they are not scared to fail.
Exactly.
They are not.
That's incredible. I watched that thing and went, oh my God. So Brandi, how can viewers reach you? How can they find you?
Well, you can find me at my website, which is will be attached to the show notes, I'm sure.
Yes.
The training and the work that I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I do a lot of workshops and training that go from kind of half a day to 5 days. So there's lots of options there. So feel free to reach out for me there. My calendar is on there, so you can connect with me. We can have a conversation about what your organization, what you're seeing and how I can help. So yeah, for me, it's helping organizations be that place that people love to be. And in that, we'll find all that productivity and all those, the mental health of our employees improve and that space. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, I will include how to reach Brandi at the end of the show when you're watching on the video. But we're just about out of time. I want to thank Brandi for showing up and showing us that we learn and perform better at play than at fear or at stress. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, you can see this show on ROKU TV or on my YouTube page, Frank Zaccari. And if you go to the YouTube, please subscribe. I will send Brandi a link to this, and it'll be posted on all the social media links, all the groups that I'm associated with, and I'm sure Brandi will post it all to all her groups also. So it's going to be out there. If you missed the live show, catch it on the replay. Now, let me leave you with this, as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Brandi showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week when we discuss more business secrets for walking on water. Thank you again, Brandi.
Thank you so much, Frank. Have a great day.